my great hope is that the National Inquiry will expose a lot of the cover-up. And I think a lot of those people belong in prison. Social workers, care workers cared more about not upsetting what they call community relations than they did about protecting, often but not exclusively, poor and vulnerable white girls. They always choose the group that isn't the British people. The British people should always come first. They are sovereign in this country, and they're the only reason that any of us politicians are doing our job. The police spent 60,000 hours last year investigating non-crime hate incidents. Something like 90% of actual crime went unsolved. The social fabric is really frayed.
Yeah.
And I think that is crime, immigration, this sense of unfairness. People don't see a future for themselves that's brighter for the present, and they don't see a future for their children that's brighter for the present. We will need something that within political circles will be considered radical, but I think out in the country will just look normal and commonsensical.
Katie, hi.
Hi.
Good to meet you.
Very good to meet you.
Very excited to talk to you. You are a rising star of the Conservative Party, I hear.
Don't believe everything you read.
Can I believe everything I read on Wikipedia about your parents?
Yes, you can.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's so my father's family, my father's mother was German. She came to the UK as a refugee in 1937. She was 13. Her grandfather was a trade unionist, left-wing politician in Germany, fierce critic of the Nazis, right side of history, but obviously the wrong side of the present in 1933 when the Third Reich come to power. The whole family was stripped of their citizenships. Everybody they could get hold of was arrested. I have been to see the building, the town hall where my great-great-grandfather was held, and he jumped out of his second floor prison cell, jumped out of the window, made it to Czechoslovakia on his broken ankle. They set up a resistance radio station there, broadcasting back over the border. They were raided by the SS. Later on, a couple of years later, one of the operators was shot dead. And then in 1937, they came here to England. And my grandfather's family were Dutch Jews, and they were almost all murdered in Sobibor and in Auschwitz. Wow. And my grandparents met campaigning for the Labour Party. So a bit of a flip in a couple of generations. That? Yeah, exactly. But because of that, I've never been cynical about politics, which is sometimes a challenge in the current day and age. But my family, even when I was a small child, hearing all of these stories, there was a massive thing in my family about what politics can do for good and, of course, also for bad.
What's it like being a politician at a time where everybody seems to be fed up with politics? Well,
I'm fairly fed up with politics myself, so I totally understand why people feel that way.
Why are you fed up?
Because I think the British people have asked for various things repeatedly. Probably the single most obvious, most clearly evidenced issue is on immigration. Every single election-winning manifesto since 1974 has promised to cut migration. And since 1997, we've only seen it we've only seen it climb. More than 100,000 people came here a year, apart from 2020, which was exceptional for obvious reasons. And I think that's wrong. I think that's democratically wrong. And therefore, I think it's morally wrong not to do what you've been asked to do by the people who've sent you into power. I'm a new MP. I was elected last year. And part of the reason that I want to do this is because I think that's wrong. And I think it has to stop.
How is it different from how you expected?
Oh, gosh. There's quite a lot more administration. There are lots more things where sort of somebody has to just be in a room to, pass a piece of secondary legislation or something like that. There's lots of bill committees, select committees. What you see in the chamber is a really small fraction of the day. It's also very frenetic. It's just really, really busy. Most days start quite early, especially if you're doing any kind of, morning media, radio, TV. And then especially, again, if you're doing media in the evening, they can run very late. So it's very intense, but I really enjoy it. I find it really fulfilling and exciting.
Because you think you can affect change?
Because I feel like there's a really important job to be done representing my constituents and representing my country, the country that I love. And there are so many different, unfortunately, areas to work on and improve. And actually, yes, I am optimistic even about how much change you can affect. If you look at something like the Grooming Gangs campaign, everybody said, this is totally pointless. You will never get the government to change their mind on this. They've set the course and that's what they're going to do. And of course, now they have agreed to do a national inquiry. I mean, the details remain to be seen. Mm-hmm. But there are things that you can do. And the alternative is just to give up. And I'm not interested in that.
Your speech in Parliament regarding that was, how do I put it? Well, it's powerful. It was very good.
Oh, thank you.
But
it's a hard listen, though.
Yeah, and you were very precise with the language, which I know upset a couple of people, but I didn't care.
I think it's important to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think there's a fine line between imprecision and dishonesty. And sometimes people are deliberately imprecise to hide the truth. And I think that's always a mistake. It's always bad when people do that. You should be as precise and as honest as you possibly can.
Do you get the feeling, I don't know if, this is quite a punchy question, but there's been some kind of cover-up?
Definitely. There's no question. Okay. I think it's not the case, I don't think, that everybody involved knew explicitly what was happening and expressly decided not to tell the truth about it. I think, and I do also think a reasonable number of people genuinely believed that this was a conspiracy, that it almost because it was so horrific, it couldn't be true.
Well, when you hear the numbers, you're like, what?
Yes, you think that's obviously impossible.
Yeah. But
in some cases, we know very explicitly that there was a cover-up, and not even an especially subtle one. In 2010, West Midlands Police had a report that said, we know that there are men, Asian Muslim men, Pakistani, either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage, who are waiting outside schools, who are waiting outside care homes, preying on young white girls, white teenagers, 12, 13, 14, and effectively kidnapping them and turning them into sex slaves and sexually torturing them. And it is explicit in documents from the time that West Midlands Police said, this can't get out because it will inflame community tensions. And that is a cover-up. And nobody has ever... many people, not enough, but many people have now been prosecuted for committing the crimes themselves. Not one person has been prosecuted for covering them up.
Could they be? Should they be?
Yes, to both questions. There are various different crimes and ways to send people to prison for things that have happened, either misconduct in public office or various crimes to do with obstructing the course of justice. And I think that, I hope, my great hope is that the National Inquiry will expose a lot of the cover-up. And I think a lot of those people belong in prison.
Do you think, or do you know, because I had Raja Mir in here.
Yeah.
He said the cover-up runs into politicians themselves within the Labour Party. And you might not be able to answer upon that, but... he showed us documents where it was very clear people were worried about losing votes by being precise with who the kind of ethnic origin of these gangs. It then poses the question is how should this inquiry be run? Which judge should be appointed? Do you get to influence that?
No is the short answer, but we can not directly.
Yeah.
But picking the right person to do that will be a huge criterion to judge whether or not this is going to be worth the paper that it's written on. Some people think, and I can see an argument for that it would be best for that person not to be British, so they don't kind of have a stake here and have something to lose, if you like.
Yep.
But it's going to have to be somebody incredibly headstrong and determined to uncover the truth and who doesn't scare easily. I mean, we know that one girl who had been raped by a gang was burned alive in her home with her mother and her sister as a warning to the rest of the community not to tell anybody what had happened to her. So these are very, very serious people. And whilst we definitely shouldn't be so scared of them that we aren't willing to address what they've done, we should take that threat seriously. And whoever runs the inquiry, as I say, is going to have to be a brave person. I
think it's really important that everything is released, all information. Yeah. We know everything that happens. But I also haven't heard enough with regards to how as a country we kind of recover from this, because we don't want this to be forever a blight on the country.
Yeah.
That we only talk about the crimes, which are horrific, but what we actually do for victims and how we recover as a country. I know you're close to it. How do you think about that?
I think there's no route to getting through this, and as you say, recovering as a nation, that doesn't start with the whole truth. I just think there's no way to come to terms with some of the massive failures. I mean, I think that this is the biggest state failure in living memory in anybody's lifetime of the last 100 years. And the first step to recovering from that is being totally honest about it. And I think the second will have to be people, both justice being done and people seeing that justice is done. Things like people being arrested and imprisoned for the cover-up, even just people losing their jobs. We don't know, and councils are really secretive about sharing information about whether anybody was fired for this. I talked about in Parliament an instance where a social worker was responsible for a girl who was 14, and she told the social worker that she'd been raped by a man, by a Muslim man, and the following year was married to that man in an Islamic wedding ceremony. Still only 15, so not in a legal ceremony, and that man's parents became her legal guardians, and the social worker went to the wedding ceremony. It is almost incomprehensible. And as I say, we just don't know who has lost their jobs over this at a minimum. And until that happens, I don't see how we can heal. And I don't see how the victims and survivors can heal.
Does this reflect a wider issue that we have with protecting women within our society? Like, I'm a father to a daughter, and I have a son as well. And I want them both to have the same opportunities, but I know I have a bigger job protecting my daughter than my son. It's a different role. And I'm not sure we have done a good enough job.
I think in some ways it does. I think that there is a really ugly, revealing attitude that I think this whole problem of grooming and rape gangs highlights, which is to do particularly with women the authorities consider to be lower status. Mm-hmm. So, white working class women, and it is and girls. And that is by no means the only group of people who were victimized by this. There were also some boys. A lot of these gangs operated in very well-to-do areas. One of the horrific quotes that I read in Parliament was from the Oxford prosecutions. So this is not, as people thought it was for a period of time, something that's just happening in deprived areas in the north of England. But I do think that it reveals, even subconsciously, how we think about these different groups and which of them is more important. And whether they thought about it this way or not, for many, many years, the police, officials, some local politicians, health, social workers, care workers, cared more about not upsetting what they call community relations than they did about protecting, often but not exclusively, poor and vulnerable white girls. And that's just true. We have to acknowledge that if we can possibly fix it.
I agree, and I think there's a wider issue that the poorer working class feel like they've been ignored for a long time, which I think was a driving force behind reform initially, And then I believe that as that spread to the middle class, that has seen reforms popularity grow. And I do feel like the establishment has forgotten what its job's to do, which is to serve the electorate rather than us be serfs.
It's so many people feel disenfranchised,
Yeah.
and this comes back to what we were saying earlier about the political system and about migration. So many people feel that the state and the government don't work for them, which they do. They literally work for them.
Yeah.
And you can see that in all sorts of different things. I think it's clear in the way that particularly the Prime Minister and Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, approach things like courts and judges and law and international law. They're desperate to put any institution ahead of the British people. And if what the British people want is different from what the European Court of Human Rights want, they always choose the group that isn't the British people. And I think the opposite should be true. The British people should always come first. They are sovereign in this country, and they're the only reason that any of us politicians are doing our jobs. That's the only thing that gives us legitimacy. And people rightly feel totally disenfranchised because, as I say, they've voted repeatedly for things and they haven't been listened to. It's really wrong.
The first time I voted when I was 18, I voted Conservative. I've voted in probably 4 or 5 elections. I've only ever voted Conservative or not voted. I'm waiting for the Conservative Party to come and reclaim my vote.
Yeah.
At the moment, I don't think that's happening. I'm interested in your perspective on this because you were around the party during towards the end of the 14 years, and you're now an MP. What do you think the Conservative Party now need to do?
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines, the world's most responsible currency, the right way. Because the future depends on it.
I think, it's not even what I think it is objectively the case that the Conservative Party need to win back the trust of the British people. And that is a massive job because in lots of ways they've failed. Not in every way. It's not like everything is worse than it was in 2010. Schools reform, for example, was a big success. But there were lots of quite serious failures. And again, a theme, unless we've been honest about those, understood why they happened, explained why they happened, and I think crucially, given a very clear and specific plan for what would happen if the British people were generous enough to send us back into government and why that would never happen again. My view is the only thing now that the Conservatives can do is be incredibly specific. So, if you vote Conservative, here is exactly what you're going to get. For my money, down to a kind of draft schedule of legislation. Within the first 6 months, we will pass all of these bills. These are all going to be put before Parliament, which also means, by the way, that all of your candidates and future MPs know what they're voting for. And so you shouldn't end up in a situation where you have any candidates who say, I don't want to do that. You say, well, this is a platform that you stood on. And I also think that you have to do that because running the country, being the government, is like being hit by a freight train every day. And so if you don't go in with a really clear plan for what you're going to do, you will just be overwhelmed by the day-to-day running of the country. And we see that now with this government. Keir Starmer, as it turns out, correctly assessed that the best thing for him to say in the run-up to the election was basically nothing, which means he's got all sorts of different MPs who think that they've been elected on all sorts of different platforms. And already, despite his massive majority, he can't really get anything meaningful done. which obviously I'm not a Labour member or MP or supporter, but, I do live here. I am a citizen, and I think that's really bad. It's really frightening and sad and terrible to see the country's government unable to function.
But is it really because we got a government that the country didn't really want?
Well, in many ways, the 2024 general election wasn't won by Labour. It was just lost very hard by the Conservatives. I think I'm right in saying that the Conservative government, as was in 2024, lost more seats than any party than any government in a general election ever.
You're right.
So it was a total drubbing, and lots of places ended up with a Labour MP that actually would have had a Conservative plus Reform vote that was higher than that. It didn't indicate that these places had become more left-wing, but that's just the way that our electoral system works. But
it was more apathetic because the voter turnout was very low.
The voter turnout was very low, and you see across the country massively disproportionately compared to other years. Lots of people have very small majorities, so you've got a government with a very broad but very shallow majority, and not able to do very much because, as you say, for a couple of different reasons. One of which is they weren't really chosen by the people; they were just sort of there.
Yeah, I think I'm under Corbyn. I think we can't. It became to me that it was quite clear that people understood you can't just give stuff away for free.
Yeah.
Corbyn tried, he failed. The Conservatives won the election. I think Keir Starmer's following a similar path, the levels of debt, the level of spending. I just watched PMQs today, and and he's telling us how he's spending money here, there, and everywhere, which has got to be paid for. And it makes me think that form of kind of Labour government that just gives a lot of money away just doesn't work anymore. But to stop it needs a strong opposition who's very clear on what we want and what the country wants. And whilst Reform seem to be doing well in every poll and every by-election and councillor election, when I speak to people, even if they say they're voting for Reform, they also say things like, I'm waiting for the Conservatives. And it feels like the time is now to strike, but we're still not hearing precise language of what's coming. So help me understand how that works.
Well, I'm not privy to all of those decisions, but my understanding is, which I can totally see why that's what she's doing, that Kemi Badenoch is working through things in order. So, what are your principles? What's your diagnosis of the problem? And then what in detail are you going to do about that? And a lot of these problems are by no means impossible, but they are hard and they're interlinked and they're complicated. And so let's take something like leaving the ECHR.
Mm-hmm.
I am on record as saying I think that we need to do that.
It's a popular idea.
I personally don't think that we can secure the border within the European Court of Human Rights as it now functions. Maybe it would have been, it was different when it was set up, but what it has become. But if you're going to do that, which, as I say, I think we should, you need to have an actual plan. Are you going to void all of the decisions that were made for the time that it was there? Are you going to replace the Human Rights Act with anything at all? If you don't replace it with anything at all, and you don't void the decisions, does everything basically still stand because of precedent, because of how common law works in England and Wales? And so all of these questions are answerable, but they do actually need to be answered. And so I think the way that I understand it is the plan is to have answers to those questions to be able to take to the public. But I think what is really important is, in the meantime, that our principles are very clear. And again, Kemi gave a speech recently on migration where she said, we're going to have to rebuild this. And if the ECHR gets in the way, and as I say, I think it does, then we can't be members anymore. That's the principle. People need to know what your priorities are, what you are and what you aren't. And I really believe, otherwise, obviously, I would be sitting here in a different capacity, that the Conservative Party can do that. And I think that there are a lot of people like you feeling about it the way that you describe, that I think want to be earned back, but it will have to be earned.
Yeah.
What's not going to happen is people aren't just going to sort of come back naturally because why should they?
Yeah, and I mean, this is very personal, but I'm not waiting for apologies or acceptance. It's all happened. It's happened in the past.
But you want to see what's
there's new
coming,
people.
What's going to be better?
I've followed you with great interest. Nick Timothy with great interest. There's good people within the Conservative Party. I've been won over by some of the things that Reform have been doing because of what they've been saying they're going to do. Whether they can deliver or not, I have questions. I'm waiting to see, but I'm kind of waiting for answers because I think one of my problems with government is the pure size of it now and what it's involved in.
Yeah.
And just I'll give you a great example. Today's a really great example. We had a letter stuck on the door the other day, and it was from a debt collector for our business rates. And Kurt will tell you, I pay all my bills that come in within 24 hours. I'm a fast payer. Yeah. I hadn't seen my business rates bill. I've paid the first two.
Yeah.
And it was a debt collection. So I tried to find out where the bill was. I couldn't find it. Eventually went downstairs, and there was a huge pile of post. Eventually found it in the bottom of it. I paid it immediately. And the debt collection agency phoned me, said, you've got to pay the enforcement amount. It's nearly £2,000. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I've paid what is owed. They're like, no, you have to pay this. Otherwise, and what he said to me was, the enforcement will continue, and if you refuse to pay it, we'll issue a winding up order. Now, I operate a business. I pay a lot of tax. I employ people. It's not the only business I have. It turns out we didn't receive the letter because whoever took over the operations of this tenancy stopped delivering our post.
Yeah.
So there's a mistake that's happened there. We found the mistake. We've paid it. And that kind of thing just makes me go, I'm so fed up of this country.
That story reminds me of, do you ever deal with Companies House? I mean, I presume you file your accounts.
Course, yeah.
So when the system works, it actually works pretty well.
Yeah.
If anything goes wrong, it's game over. So I amended a set of my accounts for a company that I was involved with. I sent it to Companies House, and they filed them in the wrong place. And because they filed them in the wrong place, I wasn't then able to file my accounts for the subsequent year. And I kept calling them and emailing them and saying, you've misfiled my account, so I can't file my accounts for, I think it was 2019. And they kept saying, no, you filed for 2019. And I would have to say, no, as I've already explained to you, if you open this document, you will see it says amended 2018, or I can't remember what the details were. And I spent well over a year, it's all documented on email and calls, trying to convince them that I hadn't submitted the accounts and I still needed to submit them. When they finally accepted that this was the case, they fined me nearly £2,000, £1,900. I appealed the fine and I lost the appeal. And then I did a second appeal and thankfully they accepted on the second appeal. But I was like, this is your fault. I have corrected your mistake and you're trying to charge me money for it. So there are so many things like that. I mean, obviously, I'm a conservative. I believe as a principle in small state, but it's gone way past ideology now, just into pragmatism. The government obviously does far too much, and to a lower and lower quality. No organisation could do the scope of what the modern British state tries to do to any degree of quality. And that's what we observe. Things don't work.
And I'm seeing it from two directions, Katie. The things that personally affect me, such as that fine that's come through, there was a moment I was on 9 points for my driving license, but two of them were for 25 and a 20, where you just miss it and you're like,
The 20-mile-an-hour zones drive me nuts.
And I know they exist for a reason, and I know the statistics prove, but it just feels like it's just frustrating. And I feel like any opportunity to finance exists. And then I see it also with running my companies, the amount of bureaucracy and red tape and all the employment law stuff is crazy. I am not doing everything I should be doing with regards to employment law because I just don't have the time. Not this business. Sorry, let me just finish. Like I have a coffee shop and a bar. I just don't have the time to do every single review, employment contract, everything that's wanted. It's not possible. But then I then see it the other side where I'm playing it by the rules. People who aren't playing it by the rules are grifting the system. Landlords, I know of a landlord in Bedford, I don't know if you know Bedford, but where I'm from, who stopped buying properties to convert them and rent them out because the local council pays so much, he just rents properties and sublets them to the council because they pay way over the odds. And I just see everywhere I see people not playing by the rules, costing us as a taxpayer, and me as a taxpayer playing by the rules, getting punished. And it's just like, What has happened to this country?
Well, do you know the phrase Anarcho-tyranny?
Yes, I do know that.
So at the moment, particularly on a shadow Home Office minister, particularly on the crime brief, but it's in all sorts of areas, and regulation is an obvious one. It drives people, exactly as you say, completely mad, because it's effectively the rule-abiding people get crushed. So the rules get more and more draconian for people who are willing to abide by them. And a classic example of this is non-crime hate incidents. So the police spent 60,000 hours last year investigating non-crime hate incidents. Something like 90% of actual crime went unsolved. So even if you think non-crime hate incidents are a good idea, which I don't, because I think that they have a chilling effect on free speech, how can it possibly be a good use of police resources to spend 60,000 hours on those, which are by definition not crimes? I mean, the clue's in the name, and not solving actual crime, almost all of which goes unsolved. It's totally infuriating, and it's the unfairness of it. I think people, and the unfairness of it is really, I think, what's at the bottom of so many different things where people feel angry. Is, the British are broadly very reasonable and very generous and very tolerant and very polite,
patient,
and it takes a lot to make them lose their temper.
Yep.
But unfairness is something that really will rile people, and I had this a lot over the winter fuel payment. So quite a lot of my constituents actually said, do you know what? In theory, managed the right way, I'm not against means testing winter fuel. What I am against is all of these pensioners who paid into the system their whole lives losing this payment when we're spending £4 million a day on hotels, or £6 billion a year for universal credit to go to people who aren't foreign nationals, or social housing to go to people who've come here illegally. People think that that's really unfair, and they're right.
It's very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
I think on the back of that, before I ask that question, do you have a kind of political, economic, theoretical framework that you work to? Like, how do you think about government and economics?
Most of my politics, I would say, are quite instinctive rather than academic. So I wouldn't say that I have a kind of list of books that, if you read these 4 things, you would get a sense of how I view the world. I'm pretty practical and pragmatic, I think. I often think about my mum, who I think has voted Conservative in pretty much every election, but she's not at all tribal about it. And if you said to her, are you a Tory? She would say, no, I just am commonsensical, and I know how I think the world works, and I'll vote for the party that I think most understands how the world works, which is I've always felt that the Conservative philosophy is the one that most understands incentives, basically, and what moves people to behave in the way that they do, which is why I've always been a Conservative. I've been a member of the party since I was at university. But I don't have a particular...
well, what are your instincts saying right now? I have no idea what that is. Who is... That's never happened.
Exciting.
Yeah.
It better not be your debt collection agency.
Yeah, it'd be funny if it is.
Yeah, we'll get them in.
I had a strong argument with him earlier.
They can be really... I mean, it's one thing for people like you and me who I think are in a position to argue the toss. But I have a lot of constituents who are really vulnerable, or they're elderly, and their energy company screws something up and they get a debt collection company and they're absolutely terrified. They write to me or they call me and they are really panicking because they're asking for money that they don't have, and it's not their fault. It's awful. I think a load of them are really, really heavy-handed.
Well, he said to me, because I said I hadn't received the bill, and he said, well, if you hadn't realised you hadn't received the bill, why had you not phoned up the Westminster Council? I was like, I don't sit there
for
every
a bill that I didn't know that I hadn't got.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
He said it's a statutory duty. It's in your lease. You should know. I was like, look, I pay the bills when they come in. I don't, wake up every day and go, which bills haven't arrived yet? I've got 5 companies. Come on. We had a little bit of an argument. I said, I'm not paying it. Wind up my company. I'm just not paying it. I don't care.
And is that where it is now?
Well, he said
you should write to your MP.
I should write to my MP. It's Yassin Mohammed. He's a Labour MP. I'm not sure he'll care. Anyway, back to your instincts.
What are my instincts saying?
Yes.
Well, fundamentally, my instincts are saying, I believe in this country, I love this country, and I really think that Britain's best days are ahead if we want them to be. But the situation that we're in at the moment is really challenging. I think there's 3 big parts to that. I think one we've talked about already, which is I think the social fabric is really frayed, and I think that is crime, immigration, this sense of unfairness. Mm-hmm. The second one is the economy. So the British economy hasn't grown meaningfully, by which I mean GDP per capita. I'm much less interested in the overall thing, but how well each of us individually is doing hasn't really grown meaningfully in a couple of decades now. For easily for the whole of my adult life and a bit more, and that's a serious problem because people don't see a future for themselves that's brighter for the present, and they don't see a future for their children that's brighter for the present. And I think that is due to a number of different things. The energy price is one. Massive overregulation in the economy, I think, is another. It's just really difficult now in Britain to make money, as we were talking about. You need to run businesses and to employ people and to generate growth. And then I think the third one we touched on, but is this feeling that nothing works, that our public services don't work, that the state doesn't work, that all of the things that the government needs to do, and you and I think have probably agreed that list of things that really only the government can do is quite short, but it isn't doing them very well. And all of those problems I really, truly believe can be solved, but they definitely aren't going to be solved by more of the same of what we've been doing. Yeah,
I think the government just needs to do a lot less.
Yes.
Just a lot less.
There's no way. I spent most of my career in finance, and I used to work on listed equities, like stocks and shares markets. And conglomerates trade at a discount. So if you are a company that does lots of different disparate things, often because you bought up different companies over time, then you'll be worth less than other companies that have a single focus or a couple of focuses or work just in one industry. And the reason for that is because you dilute focus across the organization. And the government is like that times a million on steroids. I mean, it does so many things that are really low value. And therefore, it's impossible to have enough time, focus, money to do the few things that it really needs to do very well.
Yep. As a business owner, one of the things that stands out to me is that nearly all the benefits of running a business are gone. You have the benefits of being your own boss, which is great. You have the benefits of, I'll admit something get me in trouble here. You can put a meal through that isn't maybe a work meal and just say it is. Like,
la 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 la.
No, but like, I think sometimes it's best to be honest, because I know a lot of people out there are starting. I went out to Argentina with Kurt over there. We made a documentary. It got so bad there that people ended up just breaking the law so their businesses could make money.
Yeah.
So we had a guy came into our cafe the other day to tap off the gas. And I said, why are you bothering doing this? He said, well, we have to do it because some restaurants are now bypassing the tapping so they can get free gas because they cannot afford to keep the restaurant going otherwise. So for people to keep things going. So one of the few benefits, because all the dividend benefits and have taken away most of entrepreneurs' relief, all the benefits of running a company have gone, but the risks have increased. That there's very little reason to invest. And I think there needs to be incentives. If you're willing to put up capital to start a business, you should pay a little bit less tax on a dividend. You should be able to get some kind of benefit from it. A lot of that's gone. And that's frustrating as somebody I want to start more businesses. Katie, I am sat there wanting to start more businesses.
And we need that. The country needs you.
It does, but it needs. I mean, I don't know what it's like where you are,
But you don't feel that way. And
no,
that's
it's
the
just not
massive
worth
problem.
it. Honestly, I have money sat on the sidelines ready to put in businesses. I just stuck it all in Bitcoin. I just I'll leave it there. I know in 4 to 10 years that will appreciate in value because the money I'm going to put into businesses, and I don't mind if the businesses don't make a lot of money. I just like running businesses, but they've got to make something. I don't know what it's like in your constituency, but in Bedford it's really hard. Businesses are closing down all the time. There's just there's these multiple forces happening. We have a town centre now that's plagued with people with drug and alcohol problems, shoplifting, drug taking on the high street, drug dealing just off the high street. You see it. There's no police presence. I know people aren't coming into the town because they think it's dangerous. Taxes are up, bureaucracy's up, so that's another pressure on the business. And the people who are coming into the town have got less money because of inflation and mainly because of inflation and maybe because they've lost their jobs. So in every direction, there's these pressures on businesses and they're just closing. And so the high street's just dying. And I don't see from government anything that's going to change because I don't think they appreciate the scale of the problem, or if they do, they're not willing to make the kind of drastic changes that are required. Because I think Labour are trying to walk a fine line between keeping voters happy and trying to stay within their fiscal rules. Whereas actually, I think we need something quite drastic. Something I've often heard people say we need a Millet-style character in the UK. Maybe not that extreme, but somebody who's willing to, really kind of slash the spend of government and go with some quite bold growth policies. I don't see where that's coming from.
Well, and as you say, the current government is basically the opposite. So they seem to think the line of all of the lines in the budget, Rachel Reeves has only delivered one so far, but in the budget that she gave, the line that really made my jaw hit the floor was when she said, businesses depend on strong public services. And the truth is literally the opposite.
Of that. Yeah.
So if the entire public sector shut down tomorrow, businesses would still operate. I mean, obviously it would be hard without the police and, I'm not saying that would be a good thing, but it is not true that businesses rely on the public sector. It is true that the public sector relies on businesses. There is no money created in this country. There's no wealth created. There's no growth other than what businesses make. Everything that the public sector does is just recycling that money through taxes and then paying it back out through salaries. And I really think that they don't understand that. And a lot of these, like employer NICs is the classic one, they just seem to think that businesses just have more money, that profit is a bad thing, that everybody's sort of raking it in, having these massive margins. What I have where I live, it's slightly different because it's very much kind of the middle of the countryside, lots of villages and really small towns. But in the rural economy, lots of people are part-time. And so I have loads of businesses, especially retail, hospitality and childcare, who, not just because the NIC's rate has risen, but because the threshold has fallen, their monthly tax bill literally quadrupled because previously they had almost nobody that was caught by it. And now almost everybody's caught by it because it fell from whatever it was, £9,100 to £5,000. And I talk to nurseries that just say, we are literally just going to have to close because they are told by the government how much they can charge for their services. So they can't make any more money. They are dealing with a massively restrictive regulatory environment. In some respects, fair enough, because they're dealing with small children. But I think even then it's more than it needs to be. And now they're being charged more. And it's taxes. So there's nowhere for that money to come from. It doesn't exist. The profits do not exist to pay the government anymore. And the Chancellor genuinely doesn't seem to understand that.
Or do they understand it, but they are ideologically driven? Because I don't understand how a government can be in power, how someone like Rachel Reeves can be the Chancellor, and she doesn't sit down with economists and say, these are my plans, what do you think? I don't understand that. Because everything she said she was going to do, she was warned about the impact, and it's happened. Jobs. I mean, I watched PMQs today, and I believe they're just lying.
Well, I can't believe the Prime Minister said twice business confidence is at a 9-year high. I mean, it is remarkably brazen.
I wrote it down here. Keir, business confidence at a 9-year highe. I put what? Kurt said what? Because I was like, absolutely not.
I sat there in the room, genuinely like does he never doesn't he even have businesses in his own constituency? Does he never talk to anybody? I mean, it's not even credible.
It's definitely not at a 9-year high. It's probably the lowest I've ever felt it, because I know personally I'm not, and I'm friends with other local business owners. We get together, we talk about it.
Of course.
And everyone said, I mean, third week of the month, especially in hospitality, is always terrible.
Mm.
You're waiting for the end of the month where people get paid.
Yeah.
And that didn't used to be the case.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my businesses also in my constituency are agricultural. Okay. And they've been absolutely hammered. So it's grim. All of this stuff can be fixed, but it is currently grim.
So because I think the problem with the Conservative Party, and I can see how it slides over time. I can just see that. I can see how you just take a bit more tax, a bit more regulation, a bit more tax. I feel like the Conservative Party lost the principles of what it is, which is small government, low taxation, pro-growth. But a return to that, Liz Truss tried it. We had her here. She tried it too quickly.
And she also spent before she saved.
Yeah, and the markets weren't ready. But she definitely recognised the problem, and she was honest about it. Do we need a radical Conservative Party? And I don't mean radicalism crazy, just radical and willing to make really big decisions. And is it even possible? Because
I think that to essentially fix the system in all of the various ways that we need to, we will need something that within political circles will be considered radical, but I think out in the country will just look normal and commonsensical. Things like taking control of the border again, the action that it will take to do that within Westminster, within SW1, people will see as being radical. I think it's the extreme position is to give up, to say, oh, well, people will just have to come here illegally and so be it, or to do what the government is currently doing, which is to claim that they're going to smash the gangs, which is farcical. But it's, again, if you take something like the ECHR, there are no benefits to being in it. There's lots of costs to being in it. I think it's a much more ideological sort of extreme perspective to say, well, we have to stay in no matter the costs, no matter what it costs the country, than to say, on balance, this is worse for the British people than it is better. Thank you very much, but we're going to leave. And I think until and unless, and I think Kemi Badenoch is totally willing to say things that other people aren't willing to say, until and unless we have a Conservative Party that's willing to do that, we won't see the change that we need, that the country needs.
I actually quite admire Kemi recently. I feel like she's grown into that role.
Yeah.
And she's become more focused in PMQs, actually.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating as a voter to watch people not answer the questions that are given them.
Even just in the room, it's infuriating. And it's amazing. Was it last week or the week before? She started by asking the Prime Minister a question that he just said yes to. And then it was again on the economy. It was to do with tax. I can't remember exactly what it was. And then she asked him a few subsequent questions that he obviously didn't want to answer. So he gave this long answer that wasn't at all an answer, that just talked about other things. And it was so obvious that he just didn't want to talk about it. It's so kind of unsophisticated. But the public will notice that you didn't answer the question. And
we notice it.
It is a real... There are sometimes, not very many, but there are some questions where, I don't know, if the Chancellor were asked, are you aiming for house prices to fall by 25% or something? Obviously, she wouldn't ever be aiming to do that. But if she said yes to that, then there would be a markets panic and house prices would fall immediately, probably more than 25. There are some questions actually that it's dangerous to answer really plainly, because particularly the markets will react to them and anticipate what you might then do. But almost all the time, you should just answer the question.
Yeah.
And people will respect and prefer an honest, uncomfortable answer to what the kind of academic that oversaw my degree called a long screed of guff. He was a very dour Yorkshireman, and he used to go completely nuts if we would give these, like long flowery answers that didn't really answer the question. And he was right.
Well,
it's
comes
very,
out
very annoying.
Being again precise with language. It's what they teach at Harvard. I know it's what is a fundamental part of what happens at, say, Meta at Facebook. That precision in language is really important, and also, I think we like, as the British people, we like some imperfections, some mistakes.
Nobody's perfect. People know that. The British public's very forgiving.
Yes.
The Conservative Party, unfortunately, had to make some mistakes really quite repeatedly for the public to lose trust in them. There were several times where they might say, the pandemic, I think, was a classic example of that. Various mistakes were made over how the pandemic was managed. But broadly speaking, the public went, that was a nightmare. Nobody's ever dealt with anything like that before. Clearly, everybody was trying their best. Some of these things went totally wrong. But, people didn't pounce on every single thing because everybody understood that it was hard. But not even to do the public the credit of answering the question honestly, even if the answer is, yes, that wasn't our finest hour, or yes, that was wrong, we shouldn't have done that. I don't think you should be in public service if you can't tell the truth to the public like that.
Well, the same with going back to the rape gangs when the Casey report came out and we had the announcement of the public inquiry. I saw an interview with Rachel Reeves and she was asked, should the government apologise for calling this a right-wing conspiracy? It just dodged the question. It was such an easy thing to apologise for.
And also, what I find, it's not about me, but so personally upsetting about that is, like I said earlier, it actually sounds like the kind of thing that does sound like a sort of far-right extremist conspiracy.
Yeah.
And I think it would be really powerful as part of the process of healing from this and moving on if people like Rachel Reeves, people like the Prime Minister, people like Lucy Powell, who called it a dog whistle, were to say, do you know what? I actually thought this was a conspiracy. It was so horrifying. I thought it can't possibly be true. I was totally wrong. I'm really embarrassed and ashamed that I got it so wrong. I promise you, we will get the response and the solution right. We're not going to make a mistake like this again. I think that would go really far to healing some of these scars.
But I think a lot of us didn't realise when Tommy Robinson was outside court trying to film these people, and I know it's against the law what he's trying to do apparently, but when he did, I think a lot of us wrote him off and what he was doing. And this isn't, I'm not asking you to back Tommy Robinson here, but I just think most of us thought this is a conspiracy, but what do you want about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands? That doesn't sound right.
There was a long time when the only political party in Britain that would acknowledge the truth of this was the BNP. That is deeply uncomfortable. We should all look at ourselves and think about what that means for the country. But much better to do that because that's the only way that we'll move on.
Yeah. When you look at government, you're probably going to say all three to this, but what do you think the biggest issue is? Incompetence, ideology, or the machinery? So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this, you can go and read the books, but the truth is it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com.
You're right. It's a tough choice. I do think with this government, actually, I do think it's ideology. I think the machinery is interesting because I think Tony Blair said the civil service isn't left or right. It's a force for inertia. Now, I don't totally agree with that because I think that there is a self-selection whereby people who think the state is the answer want to go and work for the state.
Yes.
So I don't think he's totally right. But I think that there is something in that lots of people think, and I think lots of people, including Conservatives, thought, and I think this government thought, oh, well, the civil service is just trying to thwart everything that ministers are trying to do. And I think the current government thought, when we get in, they'll give us all the good ideas that they were holding back from the Tories because they don't like them very much. Obviously, that has not proven to be the case. But my experience of working with the civil service is a lot of them are smart, bright, committed. They understand that their job is to work for the government of the day. And yet, most of the teams that I sort of encountered and saw, the output was less than the sum of its parts. You know, the whole thing together just doesn't work. So there's no question that the machinery is a problem. But if anything, at the moment, I don't know, maybe that's helpful because the government wants to do things that are very damaging. And so maybe the fact that the system is so gummed up is stopping them from doing more of that. And the same is probably true of incompetence. I think for this government, it's ideology that worries me most of all. And that's in a couple of different areas. The economics we've already talked about. Mm-hmm. But I really worry about the way that this government feels about the law and democracy ideologically.
Okay.
I think we were talking earlier about the ECHR and the sovereignty of the British people. I think Kemi's line on this is that Keir Starmer is a lawyer, not a leader. And the reason that that's so powerful, and not least, of course, because it's true, is because Keir Starmer genuinely doesn't seem to understand that he makes the law. So if you take something like the Supreme Court gender ruling, Keir Starmer just threw his hands up and said, oh, well, okay, well, the Supreme Court has spoken. Now, in this country, unlike in the States, the Supreme Court is there to arbitrate the law which is written by Parliament. So the highest authority on the law is Parliament. So if the Supreme Court says, oh, well, we think that the law says X, Parliament can say, no, that's not what we meant. The law says Y. We passed an amendment. Here's the new law. Keir Starmer genuinely seems to think that his job is to be told by judges what the law is, which creates a circular reference, like who is in charge here. Mm. And even on something so fundamental as like who is a man and who is a woman. And that's a massive problem ideologically, again, because of this question of democracy. You know, I think Keir Starmer, Lord Hermer genuinely think, well, judges are smart and good people. They are the best people to decide the way that things should go in this country. And I think the best people to decide the way that things should go in this country are the British people. Yes. That is how our system is set up. That is why this country is and has been so great. And I think it's very clear that we've seen that rule by experts and judges and the elite class and the political class has not resulted in good outcomes. And in my opinion, everything the British people have asked for, they've always been correct. So I really, on quite a deep level of who runs the country, like who is considered the most important, who is in charge here, I really worry about this government ideologically.
Yeah. I don't know what your voting position was on these two, but the speed at which the assisted dying bill came and then the amendments to the abortion bill came.
I voted against them both.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. I would have also voted against them both. I would have found the vote against the abortion bill a lot easier than the assisted dying because that is a challenging topic, and I do try and be empathetic to both sides, but in the end, the law seemed crazy, and all my research into every other country has introduced this slippery slope.
Yeah,
it's scary.
It sounds like you and I went on a similar.
So, but the assisted dying bill seemed to be quick. The abortion bill seemed to come out of nowhere.
It was
I was like, what?
The amendment was put on a Tuesday. And the bill was voted for on a Wednesday. And I was busy both evenings. I had long-standing commitments. I was slipped from Parliament. I wasn't supposed to be in. And it came about so quickly that I couldn't even change my plans. So I missed the vote on Tuesday and I had to cancel what I was doing on Wednesday to come back in and vote against it. Unfortunately, we lost. But it's what worried me about both of them is not just the speed, but also the approach to making the law. So assisted dying in particular, it basically felt like lawmaking through anecdote. And that's not what Parliament is for.
Yeah.
You know, Parliament is not there to make sure that what happened to mum never happens to anybody else. That is not why we are sent there to make the laws of the land. What our job is to do is to weigh up all the public goods and all the public harms and work out, and it's very rarely a perfect answer, what is the best answer for most people most of the time, trying to minimize unintended consequences, trying to be pragmatic about how this could develop in the future, all of that sort of thing. And the idea that the assisted dying bill, which I'm sympathetic to the principle of, but in all scenarios, fundamentally changes our society's relationship with life and death.
Yep.
Because for the first time in our law and in our institutions, in the NHS, it becomes a choice to live or die. In certain circumstances, but still a choice to live or die, would be passed on the basis mostly of people talking about individual anecdotes and stories. And as much as that can be very powerful and very moving, and clearly that meant a lot to the people who were talking, that isn't what the law is for. That isn't what Parliament is for. And I also worry that kind of attitude leads to lots of things like over-regulation. You know, if you have one scenario where one horrible accident happens because of, I don't know, an area that wasn't fenced off, or some kind of food that wasn't temperature checked in a particular way, or whatever it might be, you then end up making life harder for everybody else. And once you stack all of those things on top of one another, the cumulative effect of that, I think, is basically grinding the economy to a halt. So whether it's on social issues or on economic issues, I think that kind of government by personal story is not a way to run a country.
You also felt, and I noticed your necklace, it felt unchristian, and it contradicted the Hippocratic Oath. Where we had both a lawyer and a doctor in here to discuss it recently, and I felt that this was putting doctors in a very unfair position as well. And
sorry, go on.
Yeah, why do these things have to go through so quickly?
So all of my doctors, and I should say, I know that there are doctors that support it. I had a couple of retired doctors, constituents who got in touch with me to support it, but all of my current GPs didn't like it and got in touch with me and asked me to vote against. And what they said was, I hear a lot in this debate about autonomy. You know, I want to choose, I want the right to choose, I want to decide things about my own life. But everybody sitting in that chamber, by virtue of sitting in that chamber, is a powerful person, is a person who has autonomy and choice. And a lot of the people that we treat are very vulnerable. I hear a lot about autonomy. I don't hear anything about compassion and protection for vulnerable people. And I think that was not entirely absent. Danny Kruger gave a really great speech on the first, pretty much the opening speech to talk against the bill, where he spoke very movingly about this. But I think the amendment that I was most depressed to see defeated was the one that would have made it optional for care, like for sort of palliative care homes and medical institutions to offer this as an option. So you won't, once all of this is passed and enacted, and I think it will be very difficult to do, it will take some time, you won't even be able to choose to go to a care home that won't ask you if you want to die. Every care home will have to offer this as an option. And I think the idea of, you know, it's one thing, it's already a massive leap to say within the NHS, within our national healthcare service, you've got the option to die. Now we're saying all institutions are going to have to tell you that you could die if you want to. And I feel like the way that nudges people's behaviour is quite sinister. Does
that come from the nudge unit itself? Something I learned about recently.
I don't I don't think it's a kind of intentional
nudge.
No, I think
Granny.
Even though I do not understand why anybody would have voted against that amendment, but I think the idea was that what's the best argument I can construct? That it would be unfair if you lived in an area where nobody offered it, maybe. But I don't have a lot of time for that.
It's bonkers. I tell you, it's a quite funny anecdote. My son's usually here with us because he's the producer of the show. He's on holiday with his mum. But we sometimes use AI to get the titles for the shows.
Sure. And
when we made that one, the first one that he spat out was "Don't Kill Granny."
Sure.
But I laugh.
We do need a human eye on these things.
Yes. No, I laugh, but it's the soft coercion.
Yeah.
That I worry about with this.
And lots of people, the classic phrase is, don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
And I think we should be worried about that.
Thinking a little bit more about the identity of the country, because one of the things I also think is lacking is a shared identity, a shared kind of vision, something to be excited about.
Right.
I have noticed, I hope you don't mind me keep asking you about this, but I have noticed there has been a growth in return to faith, in return to religion. I've noticed it amongst my interviews, amongst friends, relatives. People are returning to Christianity, their faith. I'm a Catholic. I was confirmed. I was christened. I'm not a practicing.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling almost drawn to it as some kind of outlet for the frustrations I feel.
I think there's also there's so many different elements to this, but I think there is also a yearning for absolute truth. I think there's a tendency to, everything is relative now and nothing is really real and everybody has their own truth. And I think in some ways that can be difficult or challenging, religion says, no, there's one thing that's true and this is the thing that's true and you can get on board with that or not. That's totally fine. But we're not doing different degrees of the truth. This is what it is. I personally... I was quite religious as a child and I sang a lot in my local church choir and I was baptized and confirmed and I was really quite Christian until I went to university, and then I had what I call my arrogant atheist phase, which lasted quite a long time, and I didn't come back to faith until I was 30. And the reason that I did is because one of my best friends died. Okay. So when she was 29, on the first May Bank holiday weekend, she had a seizure and she went into hospital. And she had a very aggressive form of brain cancer. She had a glioblastoma, and by the beginning of October, she had died. And it was terrible. Watching people die of cancer is something that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But in the same year, my grandfather died, and my grandfather lived to be 100. And I just thought about this a lot, and I reflected on it a lot. And it's so obvious that the fact that Rachel's life was 29 years long and Grandpa's life was 100 years long, his life wasn't worth 3 times as much as her life. And how is all of this possible, that what I consider to be the sort of inherent paradox of the human condition? How can each of us be infinitely precious and yet totally insignificant in the grand course of history? And for me, in the end, the only answer that I could come to at the bottom of all of that thought process that made sense was a religious one. But I think there are all sorts of reasons that people are coming back to faith. But I think this point about the truth is a key one.
So you feel and see it too?
Yes. Well, and I think it's a sort of documented phenomenon as well.
Oh, okay.
And I also think there's this is more speculative. I don't have any kind of evidence or data for this, but I think as people feel that maybe the world that they grew up in or the way that they want the country to be is changing or disappearing, that they want to return to those cornerstone institutions to get some answers and to get some familiarity and to get some identity, as you mentioned when you were sort of opening on the question.
Yeah. Okay, let's try and finish it a little bit more optimistically,
Sure,
because I have quite a miserable.
it.
Okay, so if you were Prime Minister,
Sure.
what's the first things you would do?
Well, starting from sort of now, because I
Yes.
think, unfortunately, the government is going to make things much worse over the next few years, however long that might be. So I think the first thing the next Conservative Prime Minister will have to do is probably undo a lot of that.
Is there no way we can get rid of them early?
Not that I am aware of. Although I do, there's a lot of discussion now about what it will mean that people feel very disenfranchised. And there's actually some really worrying polling about particularly young people and how they feel about democracy, and that they don't think it's the answer. They don't think that the system works for them.
Well, it does. It isn't working for them. I mean,
Yes, they are correct.
I think I bring this up a lot on the show, but just my son's a great example. It's just a shame he isn't here because it's two different generations.
Yeah.
But he can't afford a house.
Yeah.
House prices have risen way above average wage growth. He essentially, he needs to really be on £40,000 a year.
Yeah.
To even have a chance, and that's with me lending him some money.
Yeah.
That's a problem. I think there's a bigger problem and headwind we're facing at the moment from AI. We just released a show on AI. It was a Doomer show. It was about how the AI is going to kill us all in 5 years.
Right.
But I don't need any policy on that just right now. But I went down the AI rabbit hole for the last week. I've listened to so many podcasts, but I've been specifically targeting the impact on the labour market. And a common thread, which I hadn't identified, but now I've heard it makes sense, is that the majority of jobs that are being wiped out now are graduate jobs.
Yes.
Starter jobs. So there's people going to university now, maybe even starting next year to study for things that won't exist by the time they're finished. Yeah. But I was hearing about one company that's reduced their grad scheme from 5,000 to 3,000 people, and they expected to go down to 1,500. And there's a number of other companies who've talked about, we're having recruitment hires, find a way AI can replace that job. But it makes sense, the first job to go, the grads. If you think about even just running a podcast, we don't need a creative to design us or a copywriter to write the copy for the show. It can all be done by AI. We've gone from being able to publish a show, usually take a day to an hour, because we have access to all these tools. And so there's young people going to university, they're going to leave with lots of debt and going to be unable to get jobs. And I don't know what kind of jobs they face. And there could be a brain drain. They could just leave the country.
There's also a question of training. So if I think about when I started my career in finance, a lot of that early boring stuff that you do, like building the model and a lot of things that you will now be able to outsource to AI, if you don't do them, you never totally learn how a company's balance sheet and profit and loss statement and cash flow work. It's through doing the boring work that you do a lot of learning. Having said all of that, overall, I am an AI optimist. One of the big problems that we've had in this country is that we have effectively used migration to put off hard choices. So whenever we've had a hard decision to make, we've just brought more people here. Many, many, many of them low skilled. And lots of people, I'm not one of them, feel like or have felt like we've had to do that because of the pressures of the economy. Now, I don't think that that's true, but in an AI world, it's certainly not true, right? And there should be lots and lots of ways to expand what traditionally would have been the labour force, the amount that your country can do without actually hiring a single other person. Unemployment is still very low and we've still got lots and lots of people coming here. So there is no question that the economy will need to reshape itself over the coming years. But my strong hope is that the things that AI can do will actually allow us to do that in a much better, higher skilled way. But definitely some of those transition things around grads and around how you learn, if a lot of that work is being done automatically, are definitely going to have to be worked out.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you on the idea. What big ideas would you work on?
Well, I think there are a few basic things about our legal framework that I think need to change. There are then hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of small regulations, which I think need to be sunsetted. You know, they all just basically need to be ended. And we need to, I think one of the biggest things that a future leader of this country can do, and I think somebody like Kemi Badenoch, who has seen the way that other countries have been run and the horrors of that, and she speaks very movingly about that, is to restore our sense of national confidence and national pride. You know, I talked at the beginning about my family story. All the time I grew up, Britain were the good guys. You know, Britain alone, certainly for certain chunks of certain years, stood against fascism, has stood basically for the entirety of her history against the forces of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a perfect record. No country has a perfect record. But what the people of this country have done and been able to do is utterly amazing. And I think for most of my lifetime, you know, post Cold War, where you have a sort of peace dividend, you know, the international rules-based order, because we didn't have anybody that we were fighting against, we sort of turned that in on ourselves. So we've got this real, you know, post-colonial navel gazing where we're tearing our hair out about everything that we ever did. This country saved my family. It saved millions of other families, not just in the Second World War, but in many, many wars throughout history. And we should be proud of that as a past and be excited to move forward into our future, which I think can be just as illustrious as what's gone before. But that has to come from the country's leadership. You know, you have to believe that whoever is running the country feels that way about Britain.
Do you find it a challenge to balance that, what's happened with your family, at a time when we have challenging issues with immigration, and then we've heard of 25,000 people coming from Afghanistan who, you know, it sounds like a lot of them needed to come here to escape what is, you know, dreadful situation in Afghanistan. Is there a hard balance sometimes to get it right? Because look, my dad was an Irish immigrant, and also if I want to leave this country, I'm leaving, and I will go where I choose to go. So, is it a hard balance sometimes to know what is right and what is not on immigration?
Honestly, I don't think necessarily that it is. And I think that people, the British people in general, sort of get this intuitively, which is if you want to come to this country because you want to come to this country, not because you want to bring your home country here and enjoy all of our freedoms, but not subscribe to all of the responsibilities that come with being a person in Britain, and in particular a British citizen. If you want to come and contribute, if you want to come and assimilate, then we have a very long history of people doing that, usually in quite small numbers, which is necessary for people to integrate properly. You know, we're quite a small island, and there's only so many people that you can sort of get to understand what it means to be British at any one time. But if I take my grandmother, she came over from Germany, didn't speak a word of English, learned English, was completely English, was offered her German citizenship back after the war, didn't want it, did not consider herself to be, you know, German diaspora, didn't want to go back to Germany, wasn't loyal to Germany, didn't speak German at home, didn't teach my father German. You know, she was a Brit. And she'd come here and that was what she wanted to do. And I think the fact that people want to do that and want to come to this great country and become part of its history and story is wonderful. But people who don't want to do that, who want to just come here because they want to make money or because it's a nicer context than the one in which they were living before, but they don't actually want to subscribe to our way of life, that is damaging to our country. And the response to that has to be, I'm sorry, there isn't a place for you here. And so I actually think that balance is quite straightforward.
Okay, good. I think it'd be useful if we all knew what that way of life was and had some kind of understanding. I think that will come from politics, because there is that, I feel like, lack of identity. I think it's coming back, but there was a long period of time where you didn't even want to represent our flag because you felt like you were maybe being judged.
Yeah, and
restoring a British
find that
pride.
Really sad. I don't know if you've seen this week. There was a girl in Warwickshire
who There's rumours around the
But
the full truth to it. The sentiment is...
And if you read the speech, there is absolutely nothing in there that anybody could disagree with. And she still wasn't allowed to give it. So I think...
Hold on, are we talking about the same thing? I was talking about the girl who went to in the Jerry Halliwell pretty...
Yes, and she'd written a speech that she wanted to give.
Oh, right.
So if you, it's actually a very lovely speech about what it means to be British, and
how
what
dare she?
Yeah, I know. What was she thinking? And what it means to be proud of being British.
Yeah,
and we should all feel proud of being British, and we should know that that is something specific. I mean, there are all sorts of different things to it. Speaking English is obviously one.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's clearly a pillar. There are lots of customs, particularly to do with like marriage and romantic relationships, that we don't really recognise because we're Brits. So this is the water that we're swimming in. It's all that we've ever known. But for hundreds and hundreds of years, Britain has been really unusual in the context of the rest of the world because men and women marry one another at roughly the same age. So I think the average age of a man marrying is usually about 2 years older than a woman. We'd never had a history of much younger women marrying much older men in en masse. And men, and crucially women, have been able to choose their own romantic partners, again, for hundreds of years. Now, a lot of our culture is all about sort of very upper class cultures. And by culture, I mean, our films and TV and books and things, because there's inherent drama in saying, oh, well, the Duke has said that I have to marry this prince, but I've fallen in love with the boy who cleans the gutters or whatever. But actually, as far back, certainly as anyone can remember, but hundreds and hundreds of years before that, basically, as long as we have evidence, men and women in this country have married one another later in life than elsewhere in the world, at roughly the same age, have chosen for love, essentially, and we have almost no record as a custom of things like cousins marrying one another. And all of those things are really important because that sets the tone of your whole culture.
Mm-hmm. And
I think we should be able to say, look, that is the British way.
Mm-hmm.
It is not British for cousins to marry one another, to always be bringing, to bring brides from abroad, for a man to marry a woman who is much younger than her, throughout a community as a matter of course. Obviously, some people do that and choose to do that, and that's fine. And the British thing is for people, women especially, to choose their own spouses. That's our culture. That's how it works. But lots of these things we've never really had to identify because we just live them.
Yeah. You sound so radical, Kate.
I know. What am I thinking?
Okay, last question. You're early in your career in politics, but we hope many years ago. But do you think long term about what you would like to achieve in politics? Not in terms of do I want to be a front bench minister, do I want to become prime minister? In terms of the effect that you can have. Like, what would have made it worth it? Because I think, I've just been reading Ian Dunt's book, How Westminster Works, Why It Doesn't. I mentioned it to Josh Simmons before, but there's a whole section on there that talks about the pressure and the difficulty, the mental health strains. Like, I don't underestimate how difficult it is to be a politician, the sacrifices you make. A lot of bright people go into politics who could go into consultancy work and make a lot more money and not be shouted at on Twitter all day, every day. So there's a lot of sacrifices. What will have made all of this worthwhile?
It's really the sum of all of the other things that we've been talking about. I think maybe part of what we've been saying about identity, one of the things that's sad is that I worry that this is now a bit naff, but I really, really love this country. And I think it has done incredible things, and I think it can do even greater ones. And anything that I can do to help that will have made it worthwhile. I think the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment is very challenging. And so in some ways, it's a little disheartening that I think a lot of the first steps will be fixing problems rather than sort of proactively doing, nice things, if that makes sense. But I believe those problems can be fixed. I actually believe they can all be fixed. And if I can play any role in that, then I will be very glad to have done this.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. I appreciate you giving me an hour and a half of your time because I know how busy you are.
No, it's
I'm
a
very
pleasure.
demanding,
It's lovely to see you.
and it's great to meet you. I am interested in this new group of people within the Conservative Party who are talking about strong conservative ideas, and I think it's important reform have some good competition there, and I'm excited to see what the party does. So thank you and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone for listening. See you soon.